The Middle East is in flames. Sirens tear through the silence of the night. Swarms of drones and ballistic missiles cross the skies. Leaders fall, naval fleets are mobilized, and war maps are drawn as the world holds its breath. Everyone fears the start of an irreversible global conflict between Israel, the United States, and Iran. When you turn on the television today, political analysts in suits and ties try to explain this hatred. They talk about uranium enrichment, oil disputes, 20th century geopolitics, and torn treaties. But they are blind to the true history. This hatred was not born in the modern era. This war did not begin in a military cabinet in Washington or in the corridors of Tehran. The seed of this conflict was planted thousands of years ago with blood and sand in the pages of the Old Testament. And the most terrifying detail of all, the empire that today funds terror and swears to wipe Israel off the map, was the exact empire that God used to save the Jews from absolute extinction. How did the nation that once freed Israel become its worst apocalyptic nightmare? And what did the biblical prophets reveal about the inevitable end of this clash? The answer will give you chills. Welcome to History 4K. To understand the end, we have to go back to the absolute beginning. And the first big mistake most people make when looking at the news is thinking that Iran is an Arab nation. They are not. Israel's ancient conflict with the Arab peoples comes from the lineage of Ishmael and Esau. But Iran has a completely different root, a majestic and fearsome lineage. Iran is ancient Persia. They are the proud descendants of Elam, Noah's grandson. Before Rome dreamed of being an empire, Persia dominated the known world. Their empire stretched from India to the borders of Ethiopia. And for centuries, the relationship between the Jewish people and the formidable Persian Empire was something that today would seem impossible in any newspaper headline. They were not enemies. They were the greatest allies of the ancient world, an alliance forged by the very hand of God. But if you think the history of this enmity began only in modern times, prepare to go even further back in time. Long before the Persian Empire dominated the world, the first great bloody clash between the lineage of Israel and the territory of modern-day Iran happened in the days of the patriarch Abraham himself. In the book of Genesis, chapter 14, the Bible reports what historians call the first great world war of antiquity. A ruthless king named Chedorlaomer ruled the nation of Elam, the exact root territory that would form today's Persia and Iran. This ancient Elamite king formed a coalition with 4 other empires and marched with an overwhelming army toward the west. They crushed entire nations, plundered the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, and took thousands of captives. Among the prisoners of war captured by the king of Elam was Lot, the nephew of the patriarch Abraham. And it was at that exact moment that the original spark of this ancient conflict was lit. Abraham, who at the time was not even a formed nation, but only the leader of a clan, did not back down before the superpower of the East. The Bible reports that he armed 318 of his best and most trained servants. In a brilliant military tactic, Abraham executed a surprise night attack, dividing his forces in the shadows. He pursued, attacked, and crushed the coalition of the Elamite army. Abraham humiliated the ancient ancestor of the Iranians, recovered all the looted goods, and rescued his nephew alive. That was the first physical, military, and spiritual clash between the lineage of the promise and the forces of ancient Persia. a brutal rivalry that began with swords and arrows in the desert sand in Genesis, and is culminating today with ballistic missiles crossing the skies of Tel Aviv. But the wheel of history turns in a mysterious way. Ironically, the same nation that Abraham defeated in Genesis would be the nation that God would raise up centuries later to prevent the Jewish people from being wiped off the face of the earth. Year 539 BC. The Jews were in their darkest moment. Jerusalem was in ruins, Solomon's temple had been reduced to ashes, and God's people were enslaved in impenetrable Babylon. The nation of Israel seemed to have reached its tragic end. Until a king emerges from the east. Cyrus the Great, emperor of Persia, the territory we call Iran today. Babylon thought it was invincible because of its gigantic walls and the Euphrates River that protected it. But the Persians did the impossible. They diverted the river's course and entered the city, walking through the dry bed at night, while the Babylonian king threw a party profaning God's sacred vessels. Babylon fell without a single pitched battle being fought. But what the Persian king does next defies all military logic of antiquity. Instead of inheriting the Jews as his new slaves, Cyrus signs a decree freeing all of them. And it doesn't stop there. He finances with the Persian treasury itself the reconstruction of the temple in Jerusalem. Modern archaeology proved this with the discovery of the famous Cyrus cylinder. The Bible gives this Iranian king a title it never gave to any other pagan ruler in history. In the book of the prophet Isaiah, chapter 45, God himself calls Cyrus my anointed, his Mashiach. In antiquity, Persia was God's sword to protect Israel. The Jewish people prospered under the Persian banner, under the protection of modern-day Iran. But the spiritual forces operating in the shadows would never allow this peace to prevail. It was in the very heart of the Persian Empire, narrated in the book of Esther, that the first great attempt at a Holocaust in history occurred. A high advisor to the Persian king, named Haman, convinced the empire to sign an irrevocable decree to exterminate all Jewish men, women, and children from the face of the earth in a single day. What few know is that Haman was not Persian. The Bible says he was an Agagite, a descendant of the Amalekites, the people who swore to destroy Israel since the time of Moses. Spiritual hatred had infiltrated the government of ancient Iran. The genocidal plan failed because of Queen Esther's fasting and courage. But there, the demonic seed of anti-Semitism tried to take deep roots in Iranian soil. For millennia, this seed lay dormant. Did you know that even in the 20th century, until the late 1970s, Israel and Iran were trading partners? They maintained secret diplomatic relations, exchanged technology, and made billion-dollar oil deals. But in 1979, the geopolitical board turned upside down overnight. The Islamic Revolution took over Iran. The Shah was deposed. Israel's former ally turned into an armed radical theocracy. The nation that once used its treasury to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem began to openly call Israel the Little Satan and the United States the Great Satan. The blood alliance was dead. The spirit of the ancient advisor Haman had returned to power, and this time with ballistic missiles. Which brings us to the terrifying scenario we are watching today. Because the Bible is not just a history book of the past, it is the only book in the world that describes the future with surgical geopolitical precision. Over 2,600 years ago, the prophet Ezekiel had a chilling vision in chapter 38. He described a devastating war in the last days, a massive alliance of nations marching against the mountains of a newly restored Israel. The leader of this invasion is called Gog, from the land of Magog.